Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Perfect RIA Podcast. I am your co-host, Matthew Jarvis, and with me today, financial advisor and radio star extraordinaire, Wayne Firebaugh, Inc., but also of Fireproof Your Money, which I love that as a topic of the title of your show, Wayne. It's so great to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Jarvis. Yeah, it's because nobody could spell Firebaugh. They think it's like a liquor.
Like Fireball, yeah.
Or a firebug. And so we just had to dispense with that. And so I wouldn't have to spell it all the time. It's Fireproof Your Money is the
Fireproof Your Money
of the daily radio features. So, yeah.
Yep. And of course, you have your financial planning practice. You've been an INVICTUS member for some time. You and I have done masterminds together. And one of the things, Wayne, that came up when you and I were doing a mastermind together was that we share some similar beliefs. Some of them inspired by Nick Murray, some of them just over experience. Some of them, I think, shared by successful advisors across the board. But you and I were talking over the mastermind and then before we hit record that having these core beliefs, right, separate from the tactics of how do you run your practice and search, but having these core beliefs allows you to be more present during client meetings and allows you to communicate with more confidence in those meetings. So Wayne, tell us a little bit about these kind of core beliefs, kind of what some of them are, the structure behind them, et cetera.
Yeah, well, I think what it allows me to do is, you and I were talking before we came on air, is it allows me to focus on the conversation in front of me with the client. And it also gives me language to use because I've already thought about what I believe. And so I have words to put into when a client comes to a situation. I already have some words that I can try to put out there for them so that they can go, oh, okay, I remember that. And I actually have clients who'll come back and go, I heard you say this, and I want to understand how to interpret my investments or my insurance or my plan because I've given them some sort of mnemonic or acronym or something that they can remember because we're all bombarded all day,
constantly.
Every day with stuff. And I need something that helps my clients get out there and understand that. It also is liken it to the Steve Jobs black turtleneck, right? Is Steve Jobs clearly could afford something other than the black turtleneck.
Yeah.
He could afford someone to dress him if that's what he wanted to do. But it's well known he wore black turtlenecks and jeans every day so that he could think on more important things. And the more important things are what my client is telling me right now because it's not hyperbole or exaggeration to say we hold their lives in our hand. So I want to be completely present and I don't want to be thinking about, okay, well, in these four types of times you buy insurance and these times this is how we interpret an investment. I want to be ready to respond to what they have. I have a theory that all wisdom has been put into a song lyric somewhere.
That.
Yeah, right? So now I don't normally dip into country music for song lyrics, but
a lot of wisdom there,
yeah, but there is. Well, once you get around the dogs drinking and losing,
divorce, all that kind of stuff,
kind of stuff. But 1991, his debut album, a guy named Aaron Tippin wrote a song that still lives. It says, you got to stand for something, or you'll fall for anything.
Sure.
And if you want something a little bit more sacred, you can go to the Apostle Peter, who said, "Be ready to give an answer to any man." Same sort of thing. I want to know what I believe, so I have a line that I do not cross. And I'm not talking about there's ethical, moral lines.
Sure,
of
course.
Clearly, we don't steal clients' money. We do what's best for clients. But within that framework, you and I can have honest disagreements about the place of things like annuities in our practice.
Sure.
We could have differences. Asset allocation. Should you use long-term bonds or not use long-term bonds? Should you use annuities? Should you use whole life insurance? We could have honest disagreements about those things. I got to figure out what I believe. And then once I figure out what I believe, I want to document why I believe it. And so in my process, I thought about what I believed, and then I went and researched it. And did it hold up to what I found was the research? And if at some point I discover that my beliefs are incorrect or incomplete, I'm not dogmatic about it. I will change my beliefs once new information comes to light.
Yeah, there's a couple of things to pull on there. We'll take that last one first, which is when I'm doing research, I hold my beliefs very lightly, to your point, right? I don't want to be dogmatic about them. But when I leave the research space, like when I leave the space I've designated for research, when I'm in a client meeting, my beliefs are now rock solid. And when, let me give you a quick example. I know it's one you've run into all the day. I had this one this week. I was meeting with a client and they said, sort of just in passing, but it was still a sincere question. Hey, Matthew, I heard that yet another bank had shut down and I hadn't even heard of whatever bank it was. Do we need to be worried? Well, Wayne, one of my beliefs is I never need to be worried. Right, I'm a Nick Murray equities forever. We have a war chest with full of things. And so for one split second, I thought, oh, I didn't know about that bank. And what about, nope, we never worry about current events. Not ever, not one bank, not 100 banks. We never worry about current events. That is my belief in a client meeting. And the client was so appreciative that my belief was that strong, right? It's similar if you're on the airplane and you hit turbulence. The pilot comes on with fear in his voice and you hear him or her going through the bug like, oh, what the hell do we do? The plane's shaking really bad. We're going to have a big problem, right? The pilot instead is saying, when this happens, we know what to do. Ladies and gentlemen, buckle up. It'll be a little bumpy. We'll make it no problem, right? We need to be that voice of conviction for our clients.
Well, it's interesting you use a pilot analogy.
Yeah, sure,
I think it's, if you have ever flown an airplane or have been with, in a small airplane, it is done by checklist.
Yes.
And so you have a checklist for when you pre-flight the airplane. You have a checklist for when you run up the engines. You have a checklist for everything because you do not want to trust your mind. So what I'm doing is my belief system is something of a checklist, or at least a mental checklist where I've said, okay, this is my process and this is how I approach a problem. And just like this situation you had, you'd already figured out this is how I don't worry about current events because my beliefs informed my actions.
Yes.
If I hadn't allowed my beliefs to dictate how I treat this particular client and their portfolio and their financial plan, then I'd be really worried about current events. But I already took that step because I believed I don't want to be worried about current events.
To your point, Wayne, if you subscribe to a different set of beliefs, let's say you're an advisor that does momentum trading, just to pick an example, cool, then those beliefs need to have an equal level of conviction. It can't be, and this is what we fall into, if you don't have firm beliefs, you just sort of go with the wind. Right? If you're making investment decisions, just to pick that as an example, based on what you feel about the markets, you're doing everyone a disservice, right? It's like a pilot without a checklist, right? So you need to have this set of convictions. You and I choose, I think, Wayne, to be intentional about those. Let me really be clear about what my beliefs are and then how I'm going to implement those. And then I've got a space to re-examine those, but it's not in the client meeting.
That's exactly right. I mean, if I'm doing it based on how I feel, well, today I feel good and tomorrow I don't feel good because I got into a fight with one of my kids the dog chewed up the sofa and whatever. So I'm not feeling well. It can't be based on feeling. And, everything about the perfect RIA and what you and Mike have put together is about being intentional. And I just view this as as a component of being intentional. It also serves, we've all had clients that we wish we didn't have. And once we have them, we got to figure out how to not have them. And sometimes we didn't know, but other times we knew it when we took them that they weren't a good fit. Most often for me, it's because they're not a good fit with my beliefs, because my beliefs inform how I manage portfolios. My beliefs govern how often we meet, how we view insurance, how we review the plan, how we do things like tax planning. And so if they're not a good fit for my beliefs, they're going to be better served with someone else as an advisor. And I'm going to have what I call the caller ID angst every time they call, right? I see their number come up on my caller ID. I'm like, how do I get rid of them? And so by having a good formed set of beliefs that I've documented and I've proven to myself, then I can reduce the likelihood of getting those sorts of clients. But to your point, you're correct. Whatever I believe, I want to make sure I have that level of conviction because I've worked through it in my mind, whether it's momentum trading or it's whether I think everyone should have a whole life insurance policy.
Sure, whatever it is.
Whether I think it's equity index annuities or it came from Satan, whatever it is, I want to have that conviction and I want to have it proven out in my own mind.
Yeah, and I want to pull on this thread something you mentioned about having it documented, having these things in writing, because I run into I get to talk to a lot of advisors, and an example, they say, "Oh, no, I don't make any emotional decisions in my practice. Well, that itself is a lie, but show me in writing then. Like, show me in writing your policy for how much cash you keep in portfolios. Well, we don't have that in writing. Okay, then it's an emotional decision. Show me your written policy or beliefs for surge meetings or for distribution rates or for asset allocation. Well, we just kind of do those one-off. Okay, then you're acting purely emotional. And that's something I remind myself, Wayne, I know you're good at this too, of anytime I'm calling into question, hey, what should we do here? That's my warning sign of let me go pull out what we wrote down as our policy, right? How much cash should we keep in portfolios? No, we have a written policy for this. If we want to revisit the entire policy, that's fine, but we're not going to just off of a whim say, we're going to change this policy.
And clients like that. Clients like that because what happens is they go, wow, these people have really thought about this. They have come up with a policy about how much cash we hold, why they invest in this or they don't invest in that. Now, the client can then say, that's not for me, but they can at least know that I have considered it prior to ever getting together with them, that I have a process. And it goes back to the word that you always use, intentional. We do it very intentionally. Early in my career, and you and I both are big fans of Nick Murray, and Nick Murray suggested this. And so all the way back when I began my practice, he came out with a set of beliefs. And he says, you should have a set of beliefs. I totally ripped his off. I'm pretty sure he didn't care. Now, if you steal any of his other stuff, he'll come after you.
His other stuff,
he'll come for you. But he's like, changed my advisory career and gave me tremendous confidence as a new advisor because I was able to slide it across the table and say to a client, and at that point there were 10 things, I could say, this is what I believe, and this is why I believe it. This is how I'm going to work with you going forward. The thing it gives to a client as well is consistency. Right? You're raising kids. What do kids not like? Well, they don't like us as parents once they get to be teenagers, right? Yeah, there's that. But kids don't like us to be inconsistent. And our clients don't like us to be inconsistent either. And so what I tell my clients is I say, this is what I believe. This is how I interpret the world. And I am telling you this so that you'll know when you call Wayne and you say, Wayne, I got a question, you already know the answer because Wayne is consistent. And so clients understand the consistency of our relationship and the consistency of what I think and what I believe, so that we kind of have a common framework going forward.
Yeah, I want to highlight something here, Wayne, which is our beliefs will change. Some of our beliefs will change over time, right? Not some of those core ethics ones that you mentioned, but some things perhaps like distribution rates or surge meetings or your fee schedule or who you're best suited with. And I know sometimes advisors feel like they've pigeonholed themselves, right? Like, hey, I told clients this was my belief. Pick anything, it doesn't really matter. And now we're changing it. And I'd be curious, Wayne, if that's ever happened to you and how you've handled that. I know one thing that we've done with clients when we've had to change beliefs, right? So I always say, Mr. and Mrs. Client, when we set this up this way, that was the best option that was available at this time. And one of my commitments to you is to always look for a better way. And now 15 years later, how long it's been, we've found a better way and we're making this adjustment. So we need to have conviction behind our beliefs, but as you pointed out, it's not dogmatic. We're still going to embrace a change should a change present itself to be in the client's best interest.
Well, I think if you don't do that, then you're back with E.F. Hutton still selling commissioned stock trades.
That's right. Yeah.
You gotta. There are
American funds is still huge. So.
Yeah, still huge. Right. So you have to be willing to change your mind when you're presenting with new information. If you're not willing to do that, then you probably need to be in a different profession. So as new information comes, you change your mind, and you could tell the client that it used to be that I we'll pick on something. I didn't believe in using annuities, let's say, because it's kind of a hot. I didn't used to believe in annuities, but now my thinking on that has changed for reasons A, B, and C. And for that reason, we will occasionally recommend an annuity if it meets these criteria. And clients understand that. Clients want us to change when factors change. They expect us to be doing that. That's part of staying on top of things. Like the tax code changes. If I was still doing trusts as IRA beneficiaries, like maybe we were in 2018, clients are going to be really upset in 2023, 2024, and that doesn't work anymore. I mean, so we have to adapt, and clients are willing to do that if, again, we thought the process out. And we were able to explain that.
I want to highlight too, while we're going to evolve with beliefs, we also need to constantly be strengthening our beliefs. So maybe this is a bit of a dichotomy, if you will. But you and I have talked several times on this episode about Nick Murray, right? I read every single Nick Murray newsletter that ever comes out. Why? Because I need to be strengthened in that belief that we never pay attention to current events, so we own equities forever, right? That's something that I believe. And again, if someone doesn't share that belief, that's fine. Find whoever it is. But I also need to constantly strengthen that with clients, right? We need to remind them again and again, we do not respond to current events ever, no matter how severe the event, COVID, the financial crisis, inflation, the war in Russia, whatever it is, doesn't matter. We do not respond to current events. And so we both need to remind ourselves, but also to remind clients. And Wayne, I know that's something you do through your radio show and your client communications and client events, right? Here are our beliefs again and again and again, almost ad nauseum, almost, but not quite.
Yes. And you know what? I need to remind myself too, right?
Yes.
Because we're not immune from the day when the market goes down 5%. And we're worried for our own portfolios. We're worried for our clients. I mean, I'm pretty sure that we sometimes sleep worse than our clients do as we think about their portfolios and we think about their financial plans. And so I need to reassure myself and go back and look at my own beliefs and go, okay, in a period of calm, this is what I wrote down, and this is why I believe this. Now, in a period of turmoil, I'm not going to change what I believe because now it's an emotional reactive decision. It's really at the core of what we do is we're trying to convince clients, hopefully during a period of relative calm, to create a plan and to create a written plan. And they do that when they have the luxury of time and thought and clarity of mind, so that when the world gets difficult, which it will, then they already have the plan. They go, you know what? We already knew that this was going to happen. We knew that one of the spouses would die prematurely. We knew that the market would go down. We knew that a kid would come back and live at home with us. We knew that, yeah, right? We knew that because we built it in and we set it, we put it in the plan. It's the same thing for us. And we go back to that and reassure ourselves.
Wayne, let's shift gears just a little bit, or I guess kind of dramatically in our last few minutes that we have together. So you have done a radio show for quite some time. In fact, you're currently on, do I remember correctly, some 300 different stations?
I have a daily feature that airs on about a little over 300 stations.
Yeah, tell us just for a minute about that, because it's quite interesting. I only know just a handful of advisors that have been successful in the radio broadcast space, yourself being one of them. And just curious, any thoughts you have? I know we talk about podcasts all the time, but really podcasts are just sort of an iteration of a radio show. I'm just curious if there's any lessons that you've drawn from this that would be good for our listeners.
I think trying to reduce complex topics to the simple, try to make them relevant. And people want to humanize. My station owner and my primary station is always reminding me to keep it relevant for people. For example, when I talk about my kids, for a long time I wouldn't talk about my kids on the air. I don't give their names, but I talk about my kids. I'm like, so a show I did today, I talked about a conversation I had with my 18-year-old over the weekend. And people relate to that. I talk about my new grandson. I say, that these are the things that my wife and I are doing, and we look at our own beneficiary designations. And people like that. And so trying to reduce it to simplicity for clients, also remembering that I do it every day. And so as an advisor, we do this stuff every day. But when we talk about something like beneficiary designations, or we talk about exchange traded funds or whatever it is, clients, they don't do it every day. So I can repeat that same show every month. And a client would get something new out of it and go, wow, I never knew that. I'm like, well, I said it last month. Repetition, just as like complex topics for us, we need that are not our field of endeavor is not what we're expert in. We need repetition. We need simplicity so that we understand it. We got to remember that clients need that. Clients need that as well.
Yeah, I'm glad you highlighted that. It's a real benefit of being in the content production space, right? Whether it's a traditional radio show or a podcast or a blog, right? To practice again and again, how do I articulate this as simply as possible? And I think we're drawn to complexity. Maybe it's our personality type. Maybe it's just human nature, right? So we're drawn to, let me lecture about this. Let me really get into the nuances of beta or whatever else. But I know you've got several of these, Wayne, because I always love chatting with you about hearing some of your expressions, right? Of how do we just communicate this in a way that people can understand, and then more importantly, remember and implement, right? If I give them some great lecture and say, wow, that was the most profound thing ever, and they forget it before they leave the office front door, I haven't won at all. Like nothing has been beneficial there.
That's right. And the thing is by developing your own expressions, what happens is I already know that I've probably shared that with a client in the past, and they're going to go, oh yeah, this is how Wayne looks at the investment space. This is how Wayne looks at insurance. They've already heard that, because I'll say, remember when we talked about the 3 R's of investments: risk, reward, and ready access. And they go, oh yeah, I remember that. And it's part of my belief system. And then we're consistent. And I know I'm telling the same thing to every client. Yes. And so which is also an element of, I think, that's important.
Yeah, it really is, right? That consistency, the conviction behind that, all of those things. Well, Wayne, I really appreciate you having on the show and giving your insights here. You mentioned the 3 R's. I'm sure you had a couple of other ones that you had mentioned that you've got, right? So the 3 R's were risk, reward, and ready access. But give us one more of your pearls before we part ways with everybody.
When clients are want to figure out why we can't outperform the market.
Oh, sure.
So I say, well, there's 3 S's. There's surprises, there's segues, and there's stories. The surprises are over the last basically decade, in the S&P 500, there were about 5,500 give or take earning surprises. Well, that's about one per company per year. Now, these are short-term earning projections.
Yeah.
If the average company in the S&P 500 is followed by 29 analysts. If they can't figure out what's going to happen with the company in the next quarter, how are you and I going to figure out what's going to happen to the company over the next year or 5 years? It's not going to happen. But once you get that surprise, I have no idea what you're going to do with it. I have no idea where that's going to segue in your mind and what you're going to do with that information.
Yeah.
Lastly, in any given day, there are tens of millions of trades happening. Each of those represents a different story. You're investing to put your daughter through college. I'm investing for retirement. You're day trading. I'm buying, holding. We're not even playing the same game. And so there's different stories. And so when I explain that in terms of 3 S's, clients go, oh, I got that. I understand. Now, whether you agree with that or you disagree with that doesn't matter. Create what you believe and figure out a way to convey it to clients and make sure that your story is more compelling than mine.
Yeah, no, I love that. And as we've talked about in this episode, right, when a client brings up a certain concern, outperforming the market being an example, right, you already know what your response is so that you're not scrambling. Boy, I've never heard this question before. What am I going to say here? Oh, I know I'm always going to go to the 3 S's, or Micah has his 3 P's, right? Personable, profitable, and productive, right? Or whatever our war chest has 5 years in it, right? Like whatever the thing is, you want to have those to rely on again and again.
Absolutely.
Well, Wayne, thank you so much for being on the show. Thanks for being an Invictus member. It's been great working with you and seeing your practice grow. And for all of our listeners, until next time, happy planning.